Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving straight into the absolutely thrilling 2026 Moto3 Dutch Grand Prix at the legendary TT circuit Assen. Now, Assen is universally known as the Cathedral of Speed, right? But in 2026, this iconic circuit became a totally brutal battlefield. This race wasn't just about who could twist the throttle the hardest. It was one of those rare days where sharp intellect, really precise energy management, and just brilliant foresight completely triumphed over raw aggression. We're going to break down exactly how this race digest played out and how one rider managed to completely outsmart the rest of the grid. Here's our game plan for today. We'll kick things off by looking at the scorching conditions at Assen, then walk through the chaotic race development, break down Kwidzla's strategic victory, review the final race results, and finally, we'll build out the latest points ranking.
All right, part 1, Scorching Assen, the ultimate crucible.
You know, usually when you think of Assen, you expect somewhat unpredictable, often cool, and maybe even wet weather. It's just the nature of the track. But 2026? Completely different story. A record-breaking heat wave basically blanketed Europe, turning the track's surface and the air temperatures into absolute extremes. This blistering heat really became the ultimate antagonist of the day. Honestly, it wasn't just rider versus rider out there, it was the riders versus the melting asphalt.
And that extreme heat brings us to a massively critical piece of the puzzle. Before the weekend even kicked off, Pirelli released a statement saying they were focusing on the soft range tires for Assen. Now, in a standard year, this makes perfect sense, right? You want to maximize grip on a really fast-flowing layout. But with that unexpected, record-breaking heat wave we just talked about, this pre-race allocation set a really dangerous trap. It basically transformed a standard 20-lap sprint into a severe battle of attrition. It became all about delicate tire management, where trying to keep the rubber from literally melting off the rim was just as important as hitting your apexes.
Moving right along to part 2, chaotic race development, the flow of the race. Let's walk through exactly how this played out, step by step. The tension spiked literally the second the lights went out. Right in those early laps, we saw absolute chaos that completely shook up the World Championship. Adrian Cruces collided with Alvaro Carpe, and that's huge because Carpe came into this weekend second in the standings, and this crash completely wiped him out of the race, just a devastating blow. As the dust kind of settled in the mid-race, a distinct lead group started to form. By the final third, empty helmets Hakim Danish put in this phenomenal push to catch the two leading Spaniards, Máximo Quiles and David Almanza. But man, that extreme heat is just so unforgiving. In the last 3 laps, Danish just couldn't sustain the pace. He cooked his tires and dropped back into the chasing pack, which left Quiles and Almanza to break away for a super tense 2-man duel all the way to the finish line.
Okay, let's get into part 3, Quills's strategic victory, brain over brawn.
So, you've really got to wonder, right? When the track is basically an oven and everyone else is sliding around on blistering rubber, how exactly does a rider not just survive that, but actively pull away to secure his 6th victory of the season? Well, let's look at the strategy that made it happen. This right here is the absolute masterstroke. Máximo Quiles showed incredible foresight. While the vast majority of the grid took the bait and relied on the grip of the soft compound, Quiles and his CFO Moto Aspar team looked at those skyrocketing track temperatures and made a super bold choice. They went with the Pirelli medium rear tire. Quiles anticipated that those soft tires were going to suffer from severe structural deformation and thermal degradation in that kind of heat. By managing his energy and preserving his medium tire through all that early lap chaos we talked about, he had the structural integrity and the grip he needed right at the end to outlast Almanza and just pull the pin. It was honestly an absolute masterclass. Total tire whisperer stuff. Which brings us to part 4. Final race results. The survivors of Assen. Let's see how the dust settled. Looking at our top 5, Máximo Quiles obviously takes the top step, followed by David Almanza, who put in a brilliant ride for second. But honestly, we absolutely have to talk about third place here, Marco Morelli. Morelli put together an unbelievable comeback. I mean, he was languishing way back at the tail end of the top 10 in the early laps, but he navigated the chaos, totally preserved his equipment, and carved his way straight through the field to secure a double podium for the Aspar squad. Incredible ride. Valentin Perón and Jesus Rios fought hard to round out the top 5. Now, I really want to emphasize this specific number right here, 0.513 seconds. That was the tiny, tiny final gap between Quiles and Almanza at the finish line. Because look, even with that superior tire strategy, Quiles did not have an easy ride to the flag. Almanza pushed him to the absolute limit, staying glued to his rear wheel right until the final sector. It perfectly highlights just how intensely fought this strategic duel really was. Moving down the rest of the top 10, Brian Uriarte took 6th, with Hakeem Danish securing 7th after that late race fade we mentioned earlier. But look closely at 8th and 9th. Joel Kelso, who, by the way, had been incredibly fast all weekend, even topping practice, and Adrian Fernandez both got hit with crucial 3-second track limit penalties as substitutes for long lap penalties. And in a Moto3 field this tight, 3 seconds is absolutely devastating. It dropped Kelso down to 8th and Fernandez to 9th, with Casey O'Gorman completing the top 10.
Finally, Part 5, latest points ranking, a historic lead. Let's look at the big picture. The sheer jaw-dropping magnitude of this lead is just kinda hard to overstate. Maximo Quiles is sitting on a massive 211 points. Alvaro Carpe, who suffered that disastrous crash today, is all the way back at 121 points. That is a 90-point gap between first and second place. 90 points. David Almanza moves up to 109 points, but Quiles' total is just completely towering over the rest of the field right now.
And let's be really clear about something. This isn't just a comfortable championship lead. This is a historic, record-breaking milestone for the sport. By grabbing his 6th win here at Assen, Quiles has officially achieved the highest point total in the first 10 rounds in the entire history of the lightweight class. We are literally witnessing a genuinely historic season unfold right before our eyes.
Let's see how this shapes the top 5 standings. While Kajiles is off in his own zip code at 211 points, the battle right behind him is incredibly tight. Carpe is clinging on to second with 121, but Omance's podium brings him right up to 109. And right on his heels, Brian Uriarte and today's comeback king, Marco Morelli, are completely deadlocked at 102 points each. So while first place might be running away with it, the fight for second in this championship is going to be an absolute dogfight in the coming rounds.
Which leaves us with one final, totally unavoidable question to wrap up this explainer. With a historic 90-point lead, a bike he clearly feels completely at one with, and a strategic vision that lets him outthink the entire grid in the most brutal conditions, can anyone, literally anyone, stop Maximo Quiles when the 2026 season resumes at the Sachsenring? It is a massive, massive mountain to climb for the rest of the field. Thank you so much for joining me to break down this incredible race, and I'll catch you guys next time.